ETF live conversation. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, the importance of partnerships in education and training in Western Balkans. We will try to see what is happening in the region in terms of the skills development for young people and for adults, and why partnerships between different actors in education and training are important. Let me introduce you our guests for this discussion. First of all, Amira Ramhorst from the Regional Cooperation Council. Good morning, Amira.
Good morning, Maria. Good morning to our listeners, and good afternoon and good evening for those connecting from different time zones. Greetings from RCC.
Thanks a lot, Amira. Then let me introduce you Bernhard Fabianek from the European Commission. Welcome, Bernhard.
Welcome, everybody.
And last but not least, let me introduce you Ulrike Damyanovic, Senior Human Capital Development Expert from the European Training Foundation. Good morning, Ulrike.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning, and welcome from the ETF office where I'm sitting this morning.
Yeah, it's a nice feeling to be back in the office, right, Ulrike?
Exactly.
So before we get started, I'd like to invite all of our followers to send your comments and your suggestions in the chat of this conversation. But also, please let us know where you're watching us from, because we would like to know the geography of this live conversation. Please take part in it. We will be happy to have a conversation with you. Now, my first question will go to Ulrike. Ulrike, could you please briefly describe what are the main challenges that 6 economies of the Western Balkans are facing when it comes to the human capital development? Ulrike.
Maria, thank you very much for this question. I would like to be very focused, and I would like to focus on 3 common challenges, because as you know, the economies are different, progress is different, and there are common challenges. And I want to highlight 3. One is really the persisting skills mismatch and the difficult transition from school to work, which increases youth unemployment. Secondly, is we have a high volatility in skills demand for a green and digital transition. This means we are very insecure. We do not really know what is needed. Yes, we have some guess, but still there needs to be much more. And the third common challenge is for sure the quality of teaching and learning, so the quality of the education system, so that young and adults can get a good education, good skills and competencies. And let me say here that all these challenges are not new. They have existed before. But what is important that in Corona times, they have been reinforced, and also that we are going to the twin and the twin transition of green and digital. These challenges become also more pertinent. I think this is what I would like to say, and perhaps also another challenge in this whole skills discussion. All the 6 economies are in the enlargement process, where also skills development is very important. So this is a bit as an introduction. There are more challenges, but to start with this and to stress they are common. Over to you, Maria.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ulrike. In fact, I think we will come back to those challenges also from a different perspective. But now I would like to go to Bernhard. Bernhard, in October 2021, EU and Western Balkans launched the innovation agenda, the innovation agenda for the upcoming years. It is an integral part of the European Economic and Investment Plan in Western Balkans. I understand that you were heavily involved in this process. So first of all, congratulations for putting this forward and in this timely program. But my question to you is, innovation includes so many different aspects, like higher education, research, employment. How do you put it all together in one innovation agenda? And what were the challenges of preparing this innovation agenda? Bernhard, over to you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, this was quite an interesting exercise. Actually, it came as a top-down exercise. We got the new Commissioner Gabriel, and she's in charge of the Education and Culture Ministry, if you want, the department of the Commission, the one of the Joint Research Center, and us, the Research and Innovation Director General. So she said, look, she had in her previous portfolio in ICT, sort of communication, IT technologies, she had done a digital agenda for the Western Balkans. So she said, I want for my new portfolio also an agenda for the Western Balkans. And we said, oh, okay, we have a platform, we can do things. So the three services, each of us wrote a nice document and sent it to the commissioner. The commissioner said, three things? I mean, what is this? I mean, you're all my services, I want one document. And we started scratching our heads and saying, we don't work together, these are different kingdoms, and why should we really cooperate that closely? So this was actually the challenge, and that's why it's quite interesting for today's discussion on platforms, how we got together. I wouldn't say banging heads together, it was more like how can we find commonalities and how can we present it, and then not from a top-down way, because why should Brussels know what is good for the region? So how can we reach out to the partners in the region? How can we develop something that makes sense and that is also not hot air, that is deliverable, that you can really do the things, that you commit to them and sort of feasible? And exactly with the commissioner, we have now only a 6 months planning horizon with concrete actions, and things get only on the agenda for implementation when we know we have the money and the resources to do them. So that's quite a rolling thing, and it was really good to develop this, one of the terms is a co-creative way, with the partners in the region, and that actually helped us. Okay, with COVID as well was helping a bit, because this was the only way to cooperate. You couldn't have physical meetings, so we had these online meetings working nicely on these documents, and that really helped us advancing and also getting a joint understanding. So we can discuss later a bit more, but I would say this was really an excellent exercise also for us with the colleagues to get us together. And like Ulrike mentioned, we have sort of I wouldn't say a mother director general, but the one that deals actually with the Balkans as a specific service in the Commission. And of course, we had to liaise with them because it's their portfolio that we try to implement, and especially the innovation aspects of their big economic and investment plan for the region.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard. I think we will come back to this innovation agenda for sure. And I would like to invite all our followers to make their questions. And so far, I would like to welcome all of you. We have Svan Mandla, I'm apologizing for the pronunciation, from South Africa, Redouan from Morocco, Abdi from Turkey, Emina from Bosnia, Ahmad from Palestine. So please keep up with these messages. We are really enjoying that this broadcast, it has been seen from all different parts of the world. And I would like to go to Amira with my next question. Amira, you represent the Regional Cooperation Council, which is a regional body of Western Balkans that, amongst many other issues, works on the topic of human capital development, on the topic of skills. So could you please briefly describe us what are the core themes and activities that Regional Cooperation Council is working on in the field of human capital development? Amira.
Thank you, Maria. Let me just highlight for all our followers, listeners who are coming from all parts of the world, that Regional Cooperation Council is an organization focused on Southeast Europe. So therefore, our framework of cooperation is done within that geographical location, but also more particularly for the Western Balkans. And there we're focused on the EU accession. So really delighted that I have panel members on the panel, Bernhard and Ulrike. And also human capital development and partnerships are really at the core of everything that RCC does, and it's cross-cutting. I come from employment and social affairs platform project, which focuses on employment and social affairs. And you can imagine that human capital is an inevitable part of our work as we work to actually bring strong employment opportunities across the Western Balkans, whether it's for youth, for women, or more broadly. Ulrike touched on challenges and definitely agree on those in the difficult transition from school to work and the quality of education. For example, one of our contributions is we have a regional employment observatory, and maybe we can put it in the chat. And we also have, for the first time, a regional social scoreboard. And for those followers who don't know, this is a model of the EU around EU social scoreboard, which has key principles. And here we look at the transition of youth from schooling to job. We look at youth unemployment and issues like that. So, for example, for the Western Balkans, it's really stark that we have the average Western Balkan NEET rate, which is youth that are not in education, employment, or training, at around 23%. and the EU average is 11.1%. So that's really a very big gap. And not to get more into the numbers, but definitely I invite our listeners and our followers to visit our scoreboards and see how their economy is faring and also how Western Balkan is faring. But what are we actually doing? We're doing a lot in the context of the regional cooperation and centered on the common regional market. I don't want to get too technical, but this is both a political agreement and a set of agreements that the Western Balkans agreed to last year, actually, to promote growth in the region. And it has 4 pillars: trade area, investment area, digital area, and industrial and innovation area. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all 4 of these. And Bernhard has definitely touched on the importance of the innovation and a specific agenda supporting this broad regional innovation area. But let me just say an example in the regional trade area. What we're trying to promote is movement, easier movement of people, capital, goods, services. When we talk about people, how can we make sure that a doctor in one of the Western Balkan economies can work in another Western Balkan economy and his degree can be recognized? Same for dentists, same for engineers, same for architects, and we're hoping to expand this. But we're doing all of this in partnership with the governments of the Western Balkan economies. And you can imagine, as well as our listeners, how important this is, not only in COVID, where we had shortages of medical staff in different regions at different timings, but how this can contribute to greater mobility and to better quality of living and better careers and stronger and better human capital development. So this is just one example that we are working on. The second example, for example, is the Western Balkans Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition that we're working, understanding the importance of the digital skills in not only in the COVID context, but more broadly. And again, women's network in STEM, regional network that we're trying to establish and promote and cooperate. So back again to your question on partnership, as you can see, everything we do is about partnerships, whether first and foremost partnerships with our Western Balkan governments, where we set the priorities together, where we work and advance the priorities together. But I would also say private sector. Private sector is critical for us as we look at the skills, digital skills and coalition, civil societies, academia, and citizens. It's really we are an inclusive organization owned by the Western Balkan partners, I would say, not just government, but also citizens. And then partnership for me in our project with the EU as our donor, but also with organizations such as ETF, ILO. For example, in our social scoreboard, we couldn't have possibly traced all the indicators if it weren't for the excellent partnership that we have with ETF that contributed to our tracking of the indicators. So I've spoken way too long. Thank you, Maria. I'll give a chance.
No, that's fine. I just like to inform all our followers that in the chat of this conversation, you can see actually all the links to the topics and initiatives that Amira just mentioned. You can see a link to the Employment and Social Affairs platform. You can see also the link to the scoreboard. So feel free to check it out. Amira, can I make one follow-up question? Because you've mentioned this single economic area of 6 economies. Could you just, for people that are not very familiar with the EU enlargement process, explain how important it is to have this economic area for the future activities in the region? Amira.
Thank you. Again, without really wanting to be too technical, I just want to translate what does this mean for an average citizen or for a citizen living in the Western Balkans, and also put some figures. It is estimated that this would bring an additional growth of about 6.7% to the region. So if we don't implement it, we will have growth as we have. If we implement it, it will be a stronger growth. The other example is there are 6 economies in the Western Balkans. They're relatively small. For some of our viewers or followers, these are not large economies, but jointly together, they have the market of 18 million citizens. So you can imagine if you're an investor, you are more inclined to invest in a region if you can come to a region of 18 million citizens rather than a small economy. In terms of goods moving, we have had some progress in the green lanes when the COVID allowing the trucks to move, whether it's important medical supplies or overall goods. It is estimated that countless hours are actually lost on the crossings between the economies, which could all be greater efficiencies. I spoke about this particular example of related to the human capital development, where if we had mutual recognition of diplomas, people could move from one economy to the other economy. If people move, ideas move, capital moves, services moves, it's for the benefit of everybody in the region. And in a way, it's a preparation for, as we know, the Western Balkan economies all have their goal of acceding to the EU and the EU single market. But I would say it's a bit of a preparation. It is a pre-EU single market in the Western Balkan region, and it makes economies more competitive, citizens more, their human capital stronger and more dynamic, and just delivers benefits from all of them. As I said, it has 4 core areas: trade, investment, digital, and industrial innovation. One example where we actually had great progress is 0 roaming costs in the Western Balkan last year. And we used to have roaming costs. If you travel from one economy to the other, you would have to switch your mobile. You couldn't able to download, upload data and things. Now you can travel across all Western Balkan economies without any roaming costs. We're hoping to accomplish the same. We do have the political commitment, but that political commitment needs to constantly be present, and we need to deliver across all stratas, I would say, whether it's government, policy leaders, organizations, institutions, on the commitment of the common regional market.
So the idea is to first implement this common regional framework and benefit from it, and then in the future to simplify the process of integrating it into the EU, right?
In a way, they go in a way it goes hand in hand. As you implement the common or regional markets, you are adopting the EU standards, and you are closer to the EU accession. And both of these are equally important. But I agree with you; it's a good way to prepare the market for the final goal of the EU accession.
Thanks a lot, Amira. I just would like to greet our new followers that just joined us. It's Faton from Kosovo. Hello, welcome. Aspasia from Skopje. Please keep on writing where you're watching us from. We have Ferdinando from Italy. Welcome, Ferdinando. I would like to follow on something that Bernhard said at the beginning. Bernhard, you mentioned that this new innovation agenda is not about Brussels going to the region and say what the region needs, but it's about dialogue. So how would you describe this partnership process of defining the priorities for this agenda, Bernhard?
Thank you. Well, you've heard from Amira sort of the context, and actually RCC and then sort of the whole cooperation of the Western Balkan goes back to 2005, 2007. There was a famous Thessaloniki summit of head of states, and they decided to set up some kind of platforms. And in our case, it's a steering platform, a meeting of senior government officials that was sort of 15 years ago put in place. And usually we met twice, 3 times a year, different places, discussed. The various partners of the Western Balkans were reporting on the latest developments. And then we had a workshop on a topic of common interest. And then we left again and waited for the next meeting to come. And okay, every 7 years, if you want, we woke up a little bit, because then they had to, like Amira was saying, sort of this EU membership. We have then a new program, sort of financial round of involving the Western Balkan partners, and you had to negotiate these agreements. And the main thing was, how much did they have to pay to join our programs? And that was a bit of an intensive thing. And then we went back into the normal mode of having meetings and discussing. And then came COVID along, and we couldn't travel anymore. And as I said, the commissioner wanted to have something. So suddenly that group, in our case for research and innovation, it's some 20, 25 people. So 2 per partner of the Western Balkans, a few from us, a few different services that are relevant. So maybe 5, 6 people from the commission. So a small club that knows each other very well, because there's not much change, and you regularly met and so on. So with this, we started talking, saying, what could we do? What is feasible? So really a co-creative process. And of course, we lined up the things that we knew that were in the pipeline. So that helped us on our side to reach out to the colleagues to get better organized, and also present a common view from the commission, so that you would not go shopping from one commission office to the next one with your ideas, with your problems. And I think this was very much appreciated by the partners in the Western Balkans, because they saw that it made sense what was sort of put on the table. They could add, they could prioritize, they could see how it fits their national plans. So that was actually quite a very good experience also, where they not only amongst themselves, but also with us. And then when it came to specific needs, we got bankers or whatever kind of other organizations active in the region to explain certain things like public procurement aspects and so on, which all plays in. And I think especially what Ulrike was mentioning, the whole thing is seen, if you want, as a triangle. You have sort of research and education at the base with the objective to do innovation, and you need both elements, research and education, to be effective in innovation. And that one then for growth and jobs to help sort of to advance the region. Yes, of course, to get them into the European Union, but also to help themselves to be more competitive, a better future for their youth. And we know that we have seen startup centers and some of those fantastic ideas. We see international bodies active in the region, trying to sort of, on the one hand, help prospective startups, but also being very active in terms of investing, venture capitalists being there. And then if you do this together, like Amira mentioned, sort of it's a much larger pool that is more attractive for foreign investors, but also for us. And also, if you think we have common challenges, I mean, clean waters, climate change, we have forest fires in the summer. How can we address that jointly? And that is not only the Western Balkans, it also happens, all the European surrounding neighbors have the same issues. And that's also why it's in our interest to solve this, because we're all in the same boat. And I think this kind of a common understanding that not one is better than the other, but it's a challenge or several challenges that we address jointly and as good as we can from all sides. I think this helped us really nicely. And the meetings then grew because people started to understand that we can do something. So the last meetings, we have more than 90 people, most of them, of course, observing, because the agenda is very short and we focus on 2.5 hours only. But we could really see how their ideas were growing. And of course, there's now a steering platform on education and training, and there will be a new one on culture. So to us, all the aspects of the Western Balkans innovation agenda to be addressed.
So Bernhard, would it be correct to say that the key is really to have a lot of discussions and a dialogue to build on this and to build an innovation agenda for the region? Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, talking is good, but you also have to deliver. So at the very end, there has to be a concrete output. And exactly, we are now in the beginning of this new sort of 7-year phase. So one of the side talks was always, how much do we have to pay for the next round of participation? And actually, we changed the financial model. So that was yet another way of, sometimes we met each other 2-3 times a week, once on that platform for the Western Balkans, but then next time to discuss that financial the third time in the week. So that really helped people to understand each other and then go easy forward. Despite we had also government changes in the region, but people knew this was good, and sort of fundamental government changes in some of the partners, and none of our activities was even touched by that. So that was quite reassuring.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard. I think we will come back with additional questions about implementing such an ambitious plan in innovation agenda. But at this moment, I really would like to invite all of the followers that are writing where they're watching us from. We have Laura from Belgium, Entella from Albania, Kiran from Pakistan, Flavius from Nigeria. We have Albanian colleagues from Albanian Skills. We have Diamond from Myanmar and El Hadin from Morocco, Aaron from United States, Nejana from Sarajevo, Ardit from Albania, and Jenny from Finland. Thanks a lot, and keep up these messages. If you have questions to one of our speakers, please write them in the chat and we will come back to them. Now, colleagues, I think Bernhard already mentioned the difficulties or even the advantages of a COVID-19 pandemic. Ulrike, we can say that COVID-19 pandemic came to Western Balkans as well, unfortunately. So what it brought in terms of the importance of partnerships in education in the region? Ulrike.
First of all, I would like to say Amira and Bernhard, they said it very nicely, this importance of partnership, and not simply partnership for being a partnership, but really for delivering, for implementing many joint agendas, to address many challenges that the region is facing. So this importance, and in Corona times, this is even more important than ever. We need to reinforce partnership, to build on existing one, to find new ones, to implement all these challenges. And if I take, for instance, us here in the European Training Foundation, besides all the policies that have been mentioned already by my colleagues before, we have to implement together with the countries the Council recommendation on vocational education and training for resilience until 27. Yeah? And this again calls on partnership between education and world of work, a very strong partnership. Yeah? The same is with the Osnabrück Declaration for Vocational Education and Training. Also here partnership is needed. The whole economic and investment plan. So in brief, all these developments request in this challenging time that we cooperate in order to maximize the input for human capital development, building on our synergies and our complementarities, as we're here talking today, like Bernhard and Amira and us here. So to continue on this principle of partnership. And I think something what needs to be is a challenge for all of us with all these policy documents, with all this financial framework is that partnership cannot be run anymore like we did before when we met over a cup of coffee. This morning I needed my technician that I can hear you and that I can talk to you. And if you do not make it, all these challenges that we have will not help. And this brings me also to the point. When talking about partnership, we need young and adults. Yeah? Very much we talk now in Corona times only about young people. Yeah? And there's next year the year of youth. Yeah? And we are all sitting around here. We will support this agenda in the region, in the European Union and worldwide. Yeah? But also let's not forget the adults. Yeah? We need innovation. We need inclusive economies, as mentioned my colleagues before. And so I think the partnership is super important. And we here as ETF are happy to continue and build on this. But for sure, partnership like we did them before is not possible anymore. So over to you, Maria. This is what
thanks a lot,
I see that facing this challenge this morning to even connect that I can be a partner with you.
Thanks a lot, Ulrike. Bernhard, I think you mentioned actually that COVID in a way played a positive role in the negotiations around the innovation agenda. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, because, well, we couldn't travel anymore. We tried in September for a short meeting, actually, with sort of director generals, just quickly, 48 hours flying in, staying one night, and then back out. That was sort of the maximum we could do just before sort of then the head of states were launching that initiative. But I think that sort of having a short agenda, as I said, we had Wednesday mornings, 2.5 hours, 2 agenda blocks only. That helped also structuring the discussions. Yes, of course, we all say we miss the discussion in the corridor and over a cup of coffee and so on. But in advancing the thing, it was clear that people had to be prepared. You couldn't come to the meeting just to read then the documents and whatever. Everything had to be done, if you want, offline. And 2.5 hours were just, I wouldn't say rubber stamping, but going through, doing final tweaks, and then leave that subject. So I think it helped streamlining our cooperation. And also, it was cost efficient, because networks and connectivity was always there and was fine. So it also helped everyone to be on the same page, or as I said, then we also had these parallel negotiations on these agreements where you then had whole negotiation teams on the other side. So this sort of the fact that we saw each other so often and regularly really helped that it became really a joint process on all sides, evolving at the same speed. And people also taking it on them to resolve their issues. So it was not, oh, we have an issue and we can't do. No, okay, we had it, but we overcame it this and that way. And actually that was quite reassuring and really helped all to glue together and then move as a group.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard. I think it's a very inspiring story as in these times, we're really in a desperate need of some inspiration and that COVID actually can help to speed things up from a certain point of view. I just would like to welcome 2 of the new followers that we're having. It's Polychronius from Greece, hello and welcome, and Arborim from North Macedonia. Now, my next question will be, as Ulrike just mentioned, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, she said that the next year will be the year of youth. So we will all focus, I guess, our activities on this topic. Bernhard, what role does the youth play in the innovation agenda?
Yeah, the agenda is actually very broad, even includes culture and sports. But from our travel times, when we could still see and visit the colleagues in the region, especially startups are done by young people. So it's not established ones or even spin-offs from universities, is always done by the young. So we know that we need to sort of have, and that also goes back to ETF's work and so on, to ensure that there's a good quality education, that these people are then up, because they have to compete innovation-wise with the rest of the world. So their companies, their ideas, the products, their services they want to develop have to be top-notch, otherwise it wouldn't help. And there really was inspiring to see how they work, what they can do. And then it's more for us then to help them to create an environment, rapid prototyping facilities and so on, so that they have the facilities also to do. So this is where we come in when it comes to infrastructures, talking with universities, like global connectivity, broadband, these kind of things. We're talking about cloud computing, what kind of resources we can make available or get them into global activities where this can sort of be better shared and done. So from that point of view, we see it very much. Also, there's a political forum, if you want. I mean, yes, I spoke about our steering platform. Fine, this is, was set up by politics as long ago. But in addition, we have a mandate, so to speak. I spoke about the services or the colleagues from DG NEAR, that once a year we have a review, if you want, with every country on how research and education and employment aspects are progressing, like Amira said, towards this sort of joining the European Union. So you have several things to achieve. In our case, in research, it's very little legal context that needs to be done. Of course, it's more on the education side. And there's always good sort of that we musketeers come together, sit around the big table, that's a long meeting, and you have a huge agenda where you go, the latest laws, the implementation aspects of them, how they develop. And they're always, it's very interesting for us, if you want, we're towards the end of the value chain, to see how education is performing, how sort of you ensure the quality of the higher education, the university system, that this is compatible with European one, but also that the university degrees we've just heard that you get in the region are acknowledged on the European side. We do not want to sort of help the brain drain. On the contrary, we want to make sure that there, with our help on innovation, that there's a positive future in the region for the people to stay and to develop their region. There's no point to get them all to Europe. Yes, I mean, sorry, I'm an Austrian, so if you want, it's very close to the Western Balkans. If they all come to Vienna, fantastic, fine. But we have also good Austrians, so it's better to have good Serbians and good Montenegrins staying there and doing their work there, and we can cooperate with them instead of sort of we would just sort of suck it all out and like a vampire and then not leave anything in the region, because there they can.
It's about enhancing the human capital development of those countries rather
and
than
not just move them. And then sort of for us then with the Western Balkan agenda to make better conditions and to create the conditions so that it's worthwhile for them to stay.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Bernhard. And now, before going to my next question, I would like to invite all of our followers. Thanks for letting us know where you're watching us from, but also send us your questions. If you have any question about human capital development and partnerships in the 6 economies of the Western Balkans, just put them in the chat. Amira, so next year, 2022, the year of youth, what does the Regional Cooperation Council plan to do in this topic next year? Amira.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, 2022, the year of youth, but I would say we need to focus on youth every year, this year, the year after 2022, and all the other years as well, because it is very important from the perspective of the future of the Western Balkan economies, as Bernhard has said. And actually, as he was talking about Western Balkaners wanting to leave, RCC traditionally does Balkan Barometer and actually surveys youth for their own views. What do they think? And what really a really stark number where over 60% of youth said that they would leave the Western Balkans if they had the opportunity or are working on that opportunity. And this is really, as Bernhard said, and Ulrike, is something that we all must collectively work on to keep that human capital engaged and for the benefit of the growth and for their own personal development. And so in that context, back again to why youth want to leave is because obviously the opportunities for their own development, they don't see that there's such a strong opportunity. And when we look at the numbers, as I said, about 24% of youth are neither in education, employment or training compared to 11% in the EU. Or when we look at the unemployment, youth unemployment, it's 35%, and COVID has only made it worse in the Western Balkans compared to about 16.8% in the EU. So we see it's double. What we are working on particularly, and what our partners, Western Balkan governments, have committed to, is the implementation of the youth guarantee in the Western Balkans. For those of our listeners who are following and from EU countries, they know that there is an EU youth guarantee, which has been implemented in the EU and has had remarkable success. And we have actually in July this year, the ministers from the region made a commitment to start implementing the youth guarantee in the Western Balkan regions. And I'll just explain what this guarantee actually means. It means that all young people under the age of 30 receive a good quality offer in employment, continuing education, apprenticeship or traineeship within 4 months of either leaving formal education or becoming unemployed. It's a big commitment. And of course, it's not just a political commitment. Of course, it is a political commitment, but it's also a financial commitment. And youth guarantee is one of the 10 flagship priorities from the EU Economic Investment Plan that Ulrike mentioned. It will need the institutional capacities raised across all our partners across the Western Balkan economies. And I'm glad we have followers from North Macedonia, because North Macedonia actually piloted the youth guarantee. And it will need partnerships. And here, for example, in terms of assisting our Western Balkan partners, I know that ETF, together with ILO, have created a platform, and also we are there also to support that and working with our Western Balkan partners. Then partnerships with the private sectors and partnership with the youth. That is very important to us, that policies are not created top-down, but that they are created in partnership with the youth. Here, I want to share with our followers, and I hope some of them have heard about it and are following. We have a particular project. It's called Western Balkan Youth Lab project that actually works with the umbrella youth organizations, national youth councils or youth organizations, depending on the individual economy context, and enhancing the dialogue between these organizations that represent youth and the governments across the Western Balkan economies, because we want policies that are co-created, that are not created top-down, but that there's partnership. So these are all sorts of activities that we're going to be focused in the coming month and the coming year, 2022, as the year of youth. Also for our youth project, also looking at the issue of mental health, digital skills, all very important elements. And of course, as Bernhard mentioned, innovation and entrepreneurship, as we know that sometimes the dynamic startups, it's really that entrepreneurial mindset of youth that needs to be nurtured, that they see the opportunities in the Western Balkan rather than just look at how to leave the region. All very important elements to keep the human capital in the region, enrich it, make it stronger and deliver for all of us in the region. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I mean, a very interesting and I think very ambitious plan on how to keep the youngsters in the region and help to develop the human capital development. Now, there are two questions, I think, coming from the audience that I would like to take. The first one comes from Igor Panchevsky, and he's saying, what are the biggest challenges that we need to expect during decarbonization process, taking into account that most Western Balkan economies employ a large number of workers in coal sector, and these people are mostly over 50 and not ready to requalify. Who wants to take that one first?
I can take Bernhard first.
Okay, Bernhard and then Ulrike. Bernhard.
Well, of course, this is an issue, but we also have to understand that decarbonization is a must. And especially in the Western Balkans, sort of Southeast Europe, you see the huge impact climate change has already now, either in winter with sort of huge air pollution, the worst to some extent in the world you have there. Sort of, it's not Beijing or New Delhi that you often hear. It's Skopje, Pristina, that there was Sarajevo, where it really stuck the smoke for weeks. So clearly there's a way to act. But I would say there's a lot of efforts in doing solar. So the solar power plants is very much in fashion. Actually, there's even manufacturing of solar panels in the region. So I could, personally, as an engineer, I could imagine that coal workers definitely qualified to install solar power plants on sort of, I wouldn't say remote areas, but areas where you don't grow food or have pastries there. So that should be possible. And of course, one has to understand that, I mean, burning coal is not the solution. Yes, it keeps people busy, but then this would be a way to sort of, and because you also need to maintain solar power plants, that could be an interesting way. And also we have to see, sort of Western Balkan is quite a region that supplies Europe not only with food, but also with technology, product, services. So if they become green in their production, and for example, if you take Albania, that is mostly run by hydropower, so these products would qualify much better because become automatically green products. So I see this more as an opportunity than a problem.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ulrike, I think also Amira mentioned this ambitious plan, the youth guarantee for youngsters. What about adult learners? So how can we make sure that we reskill them?
I think this question goes very much back also to the chat of what Mr. Panchevsky had in the chat. So we need not to forget the adult learners, yeah, and the adults. And if you see the demographics in the region, you do not have only young people, but you have also the aging population, like in the European Union. So the whole issue that at the same time we need to look at adults, yeah, and provide reskilling, upskilling opportunities for the challenges that Bernhard mentioned before, that the people can deliver for these new developments, so that you don't face, like we see now, there are new changes, but you have no skilled people. If you look in the construction sector, if you look in the tourism sector, so this needs to go hand in hand. And this brings me to the point where we have in Europe, in the West, in all our countries, many strategies for innovation, for research, for smart specialization, for vocational training. But what will be important that in all these strategies or strategies for economic development, reskilling and upskilling for adult is integral part. So if you say, okay, the economic sector in the future is in the energy sector, there are the jobs, that you at the same time have the reskilling. I think this link, this important link of skills and economic development, this needs to be much more prominent to help the adults. So my plea is also, and I'm happy to see it in the chat, yes, one thing is young, but we have the old ones, and we talk always about famous lifelong learning, yeah, since yeah, and I think we're there again, and we need both.
Thanks a lot, Ulrike. Yeah, thanks. That I think it was an important point to be stressed. I would like to come back to the questions that we're receiving from the audience, and thanks, and keep them coming. There is a question from Aaron from the United States. Is there a database that lists all the skills of a job if a young adult want to pursue it? Don't know. Anyone would like to take that one? Is there such a list? Do we need such a list for Western Balkans? Amira, I see that you're smiling.
I'm smiling. I'm looking at reading at the question. I don't think that we have a database that lists all the skills, and I would certainly then refer to Ulrike, as I see ETF sort of really being the bastion of all the knowledge in terms of the skills and vocational training. But we definitely have good websites, and I think that your colleague has put the links in and I invite Aaron to visit, and he'll see a lot of good really materials developed, and we also cross post materials from our partner ILO and from our partner ETF under the report section, and you can see different reports on the status of the skills, whether it's more broader general population or it's for youth. Or you can look at some of the studies that have been done on the implementation of the youth guarantee and related to that. And then back again to some of the things that Ulrike mentioned, I think it's really critical not just to look at, I mean, it's very important to look at the youth as our present and as our future, but also look at the broader population, because we've been hearing through the Balkan business matter that companies have difficulties finding skilled labor. So in a way, it really, it can puzzle listeners. On one hand, we have this structural high unemployment and people looking for jobs and people being concerned about losing their jobs because their industries are not going to be sustainable in the long term. And on the other hand, we have new innovative companies emerging and looking for work, and they can't satisfy their demands. And so obviously there is that mismatch of the skills that we are seeing demanded by new innovative companies using new technologies, and some of the skills that the adult population actually accumulated 20 years ago. It's as we all know, we need to stay dynamic, and not just because of COVID, but just generally be dynamic. So I think these are all important things. There are opportunities, and I would say also on the decarbonization, there's also a health cost. Let's not forget the pollution in the Western Balkans. I mean, I know that there are some studies. Some of them are also focused on tourism. It's very difficult to promote locations if you have parts of the economies that where our airports are closed because of pollution and planes cannot land. So I think that it is an important issue, but with the right set of policies and the financial funds that are available to the Western Balkans through the Western Balkans Green Agenda and the Western Balkan European Investment Plan, these issues can be tackled. And again, through partnerships, dialogue, but also delivering actually action.
Okay, thanks a lot, Amira. Very important point. Bernhard, do you want to follow on what Amira just said?
Yeah, just to give a few concrete examples, we have seen that companies needed special skills and they couldn't find them. Schools were not delivering, so they developed their own technology centers where they trained the people. But they quickly understand that offering the training wasn't sufficient. So the people who take the training have to pay the training themselves. So they pay for their own requalification, but they understand that this was helping them. So this was a fantastic example from Bosnia and Herzegovina, where now it's a startup center that helps further. But people know if they go there and get the certificate from having achieved this or that kind of extra qualification, this is something that is really worthwhile on the market. We also see universities that are targeting businesses, or also, for US colleagues watching it, it's quite normal that the university have some kind of a business attitude and then train. But for the Western Balkans, this is not very common, so it's interesting to see that. But we also see movement from the side of the government, because there was a question about ICT skills or how ICT can help. And that is actually that the government makes competitions, even at primary, secondary schools, on innovative ideas with ICT, and then the school is awarded with a better Wi-Fi network and this kind of thing. So this is a Serbian initiative that is really helping a lot. Of course, with the insight on the government that they know training an ICT engineer does not cost that much, because they are quickly suitable for programming or whatever service delivery task, but generates a lot of tax income afterwards. So the government was doing this quite with a self-interest as well, and that's good to see how this can help. And the third element on one of these ICT questions was, yes, we are doing a lot of mapping at the moment to see what infrastructures, what resources are available. There's even an idea doing like a booking.com, but for research infrastructures. So you can go there as a company to see which universities has what tools, what expertise, which machines that you can use or services, how much it would cost, and how you can use it and what are the terms and conditions. So you're not looking for a nice place on the beach, you're looking for a good machine and skilled engineers. And that is also something that was coming up from the region. So very interesting and
yeah, I think I see Ulrike is thumbing up. So Ulrike, there is no problem of convincing people to reskill and upskill, from what I understood, right? So people understand that they need to grow, right?
Exactly. There's no need to convince them, but you need to create the opportunities. Yeah, I mean, it's no need to convince them is perhaps also not really properly said, yeah, because what we also see for reskilling and upskilling, you always talk to the usual suspects, yeah, that would do it in any case, that have access. So you mentioned here the issue of inclusiveness. I think the challenge is here because what we see from surveys generally, that you always reach the ones which have access, and there's a wide one of those young and adult who are left behind. So I think a big challenge here is not the convincing them, is an outreach issue. Yeah? This means that we really need to reach out to young and adults who do not have access. Yeah? And therefore, many initiatives, we cannot remain at state level, at regional level. You need to go down on the floor. You need to find the young people. You need to get them back there, and also the adults, I think. Yeah? And linked to this is the question of Aaron before on this database. There are lists, yeah, the lists are revisited, databases are existing. But what will be important to reach out is again also career guidance, for instance. We as ETF are working now a lot also on career guidance to see what is existing in the region, how it can be improved. We have just launched this work, and we will do this in the coming months together with the 6 economies. Yeah? Because lists and databases are fine, but if you do not reach out, it will not work. And career guidance is one issue.
Thanks a lot, Ulrike. I would like to take another question from the audience, which is a very good one, because still we are trying to focus this conversation on the partnership element in education and training. And there is a question from Jenny from Finland. Are you cooperating with NGOs? I'm not sure, Jenny, to whom exactly you did this question, but we can ask them to all the participants of the discussion. Amira, do you want to start?
Definitely. For us in the RCC, for example, in our Youth Lab project, it's all about cooperation with the youth organizations. Everything that I say Youth Lab, as my colleagues do, is actually in partnership. And I see some of them actually following. I see somebody from Bosnia and Herzegovina, if I'm right in the chat, Nikola Kandic, who represents the youth organization from Federation Bosnia and Herzegovina today, following us. So, but also more broadly, whether it's the innovation agenda, whether it's STEM, whether it's the green agenda, we definitely, when we define the priorities, we need to hear what our partners tell us, because only like that we can actually deliver. And I'll give maybe an example that's more tailored in the area where I work and build on what Ulrike says. We're working with the public employment services, as some of the listeners probably know. These are institutions that are in the economies providing counseling, career guidance, training. They're not NGOs, but we're trying to do a process of bench learning where they can learn based on models of cooperation across the EU and across the Western Balkans, and improve their cooperation with NGOs, improve their cooperation with private sector. We've just recently focused on a study in one of the Western Balkan economies where we're trying to improve the cooperation between the public employment service and the private sector, building on what Bernhard had said. So, and if once the youth guarantee is to become a reality, cooperation is going to be key, because it's not feasible just to say, okay, fine, we're going to guarantee this offer. Well, how are we going to really trace, so to speak, the young needs? How are we going to make sure that we identify them, that we provide a good offer, that the offer that we can provide is tailored to the needs of the private sector and the economy? Otherwise, all these efforts are really not going to be sustainable, because the idea is not just to register them, provide them some training, check the box and say, okay, the guarantee works. No, the idea is to engage with them, provide them in partnership with the private sector, universities, education institutions, the skills, so that actually they can be productive in the real sector and contribute both from their own perspective, but also from the perspective of the economy. So I would say partnerships with NGOs across the whole range.
Thanks a lot, Amira. Bernhard, do you want to add something about NGOs' role in the innovation agenda?
Well, actually, I wanted more to sort of see the NGOs more like the canaries in the mine that we are sort of reaching out to, especially when we have these meetings with the government. So before we have these official, as I said, meetings. the evening before, actually the afternoon before, we traditionally meet with NGOs to see, and civil society organizations, especially student organizations, but also I mentioned these kind of private initiatives, setting up technology parks and so on, that are not run by the state and not subsidized. So this is really for us very worthwhile, and then you get a different view on how things are, and especially when it comes to youth and education, then these student organizations know very well what they want. And then it's good for us to then raise this with the government and confront them with sort of what their own customers think and expect from them. So that is very useful, and we also then follow up afterwards, and how specifically for our agenda they were not so much evolved. I need to confess that, because I said this was more an intergovernmental club, but now that it's sort of rolled out, and then we see that a lot of announcements and so on are made, we are getting sort of the first contacts, and there I would agree it will be time to travel again. And then now COVID is really getting in the way, that you could really reach out to them and say, tell us, show us what is not working, or where you think improvements would be worthwhile.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard. And Ulrike, to follow up, what role NGOs play for our cooperation as ETF? Ulrike.
Also for us as ETF, the cooperation with the NGOs and civil society has always been very important, and to try to have them on board. This has been a challenge, that's clear. We also shall not fool ourselves, but it has been, and I have 25 years here in the house, it has been on the agenda, and it will be. And especially now, and Amira mentioned several times the youth guarantee, where we are supporting together with ILO and DG Employment the countries. One point will be how to get involved together with the economies, the NGOs, and especially the youth, because I come back to the point I made before, for reaching out, because they will be those who will be very important to really reach out to youth, which we could not reach sitting here on the table.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ulrike. Very good point. I think we need to wrap up this conversation. We received some questions that we could not take on board. We might follow up on them later on with all our guests, but thanks for sending them out. I would like to thank all of our guest speakers today. So Amira Ramhorst from Regional Cooperation Council. Thanks a lot, Amira.
Thank you, Maria. It's been really a great professional pleasure and privilege to share this live talk with Ulrike and Bernhard. And I loved how dynamic you have been, Maria. You've kept us engaged, and with all the questions that were streaming in from all parts of the world. So it's been definitely a privilege and pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Amira. Thanks for your kind words. Then I would like to thank Bernhard Fabianek from the European Commission. Thanks a lot, Bernhard.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I still want to answer one more question.
Go for it.
Because Polychronis was asking, was there any foresight exercise? And actually with the RCC, we have done a foresight exercise for the Western Balkans. So maybe afterwards we can share the link. Sure. And that will be done regularly. But it was a vision of the region about itself in the year 3035. More than 700 peoples were involved in sort of giving 3 scenarios, quite provocative, thought-provoking. And well, it's a foresight, so it's always a longer-term thing. So now, things for politicians, either you do things to achieve what the foresight is saying, or you don't do things to avoid what the foresight was indicating. So this is quite helpful, and I would recommend that definitely.
Thanks a lot. Bernhard, I think we can share the link afterwards after this session. But so the answer is yes, that there is this work ongoing. And I would like to thank, last but not least, Ulrike Damyanovic from the European Training Foundation. Thanks a lot, Ulrike.
Maria, thank you very much. And also for me, it's a pleasure. And even more, I see here on the speakers, Aspasia from North Macedonia. And here I talk about partnership because we have cooperated already 25 years ago. So it's a very nice example. And let me perhaps finish with, from my side, what is important for a partnership. And I've put down 3 principles. Oopsie, I don't know if you see me again. So one thing I think what is very important, and which our discussion shows today again, is common goals and joint interests. Yeah? And for us, it's human capital development together with our partners, wherever they are, and for young and adults. And the second point for a partnership is really that you share roles and responsibilities and that you are clear on this. Yeah? And then the last point, which I would like to say, is really the issue of trust. Yeah? And trust in partnership you can only build over the years. Yeah? And in Corona times it becomes more and more difficult because as we do not see, but still there's also the positive aspect. You could join many things which you could never join because you could not travel so much. Yeah? So there is also a big hope for these new ways of how you do partnership without coffee or face-to-face.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you, Maria.
Ulrike.
And to my colleagues here, to Amira and Bernhard, with who we are cooperating for a long, long time. Thanks the two
Thanks a lot,
personally
Ulrike.
and your institution. Sorry,
I
now I
see
talk
that-
too much. Sorry.
No, I see that Amira is smiling. Amira, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to make a small correction, and definitely understanding everything that Ulrike said. Common goals, shared roles, and trust, really so critical. And how now it's important that we can communicate. And I said that we have a Western Balkan roaming agreement since last year, but actually it's since this year. So that's the correction that it looks like it's been so long because it's made us travel and communicate much easier. So anyway, just a point of clarification that it's as of July 2021.
Thanks
and
a lot.
thank you again. Thank you
Thanks
again.
for this clarification. And I would like to thank all our followers for being there and for actively participating in this conversation. And I would like to invite you to come back to all our channels on 1st of December, this Wednesday, because we're going to start a new campaign on the topic of skills dimensions of migration. Very complex topic, very difficult one, but we hope you will enjoy the conversations that are to come. Stay tuned, and there is much more to come. Goodbye.